Kia ora team, Noel Willoff here. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode, but there's one important thing I want to say before you watch this video. I've noticed that over 91% of you who watch our content on YouTube do not subscribe to the podcast. My promise to you is if you subscribe to the podcast, I'll continue to get more of the guests on that you love and make sure that this conversation and this podcast grows to new levels. So please hit that subscribe button. Secondly, a massive shout out to our official sponsor of the podcast, Moana Road. If you want to save some cash and get some of their awesome gears, head to their website and plug in BTS20 and you'll get 20% off all of their products. Save some cash, support the podcast. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Barbara, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you so much for having me.
I think you're our first former minister, first guest with an honourable title. So that feels quite special.
Oh, that is pretty cool. I'm sure I won't be the last though.
Yeah. We'll see. How are you doing? I guess first and foremost, how's your week been?
It's been pretty full on. It's sort of the week after budget, so I've had lots of post-budget events. Did my first post-budget speech here in Porirua, where we live, just down the road. And for me, it's just going around doing the same thing that I was doing sort of beforehand, meeting businesses, understanding their needs, having a good discussion around this budget, what it meant for them, and then also looking forward to how we design policy for Labour.
Sounds like a very hectic week.
Yeah, it's always a hectic week and a recess week because Parliament's not sitting. But next week we are back in Parliament, so back into the House.
So what does your sort of average week look like? Is there such thing as an average week? Like how many hours are you typically working? What does that look like?
Yeah, hell no, there's no average week. Hours worked, like if it's a Parliament sitting day, so Parliament sits Tuesday to Thursday, I'm normally in by 7. And we sit till 10 p.m. at night on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on a Thursday we rise at 6. So that's normally the day, and it's like meetings, speeches in the House if you need to, analysing legislation or proposed legislation, doing the political stuff that you do, having a good debate on lots of things. But then outside of that, in a recess week, I'm either here around my electorate of mana, so that could be anywhere from Linden, Porirua, through Paikok up to Kapiti, or in the finance role, it's actually travelling a lot, so travelling up and down the country, and I've been in Auckland a lot in the last year.
What gives you because that must be incredibly taxing, on yourself, and what keeps you sort of pushing through? You got any secrets to keep mentally on top of your game?
It's kind of twofold. So one is it's awesome meeting new people, and actually you find that 9 times out of 10, because I meet a lot of business people and I meet a lot of NGOs, 9 times out of 10, everybody just wants New Zealand to be a great place. And they're also thinking quite generationally, they're thinking about their kids and their grandkids. So that actually fuels me a lot. Particularly during the 3 weeks leading up, or the 2 weeks leading up to budget, we had this big issue around pay equity claims. That really fueled me a lot, just thinking about how working women in low paid areas such as plunket nurses, teachers, hospice care workers, the issue that had happened with them. So that fueled me a lot of anger around that. And you just kind of bottle it, you channel it, and then you organise and you work off that. But then the other thing is it is taxing. So you've got to find something for your own hauora. For me, it's my family and when I get to see them. So usually in a sort of a long weekend that we would have, I'd be cooking. That's the thing I do. I love cooking. I love being able to look after my kids and the husband and put food on the table.
That's great. I think what you picked up on there earlier is something I want to touch on with this podcast is because you got your own emotions that you might feel in regards to certain policy as a politician, and some might sort of rev you up more than others, such as maybe pay equity. How do you sort of balance your own personal belief and values against sometimes if or when that might be conflicting with your political party? I guess hopefully that's not always the case because you want your party to reflect your values. But is it hard to sort of find that sort of balance, you know what I mean? Where maybe you're too passionate about one thing where you got to, run the party line.
I think you had it there when you said values, because because it's quite a taxing job, you have to be really clear on what you're doing, why you're doing it, because if not, it can burn you and it can make you realize, like, why am I wasting my time? Why am I trying to do this? So ultimately, it's the question every day when you go into Parliament, every day when you wake up, because it's a hard job and it's really easy to, think it's just throw in the towel and just go live a real basic life. But actually, why are you there? What's your purpose for being there? And my purpose for being there was ultimately so that there were children, not my own children, other people's children had the same opportunities my children do. And my children have parents, they have a warm, dry home, they have kai on the table, they go to good schools that we can support as a community. And that was the whole reason why I got into governance in the first place. And then eventually it led me to politics.
Cool. And yeah, we'll go into a bit of that story a bit later into the episode as well. I think when I was doing some research on you and your story, like resilience really sort of came up to me. And learned that tragically your mother passed away when you were 4. She was 35. And she's, now that's your namesake, which is quite special. So you get the name Barbara from. And yeah, you buried her when you were only 5 years old. So I guess like reflecting back on your story and upbringing, Barbs, like what's one word that you would describe, what's one word that you would use to describe your upbringing and why?
Oh, that's a tough question, eh? That's a good question too. I think the first word that comes to mind is challenging, and it wasn't challenging in the sense that, could have been worse. If I was really frank, could have been worse. But for having an amazing father who, again, was clear on his purpose as to why he up sticks from his home in Samoa and then came to New Zealand with his wife and at the time my 2 older siblings. So it was challenging, but it was something that I think there was always that distillation of hope that my father had for us kids. And I think you kind of look back and you think, wow, 35, that's really young. And you die at 35, you've got 4 children. And for me, when I became the politician, you go through this period of self-reflection because first of all, you got to check there's no skeletons in your closet. But then second of all, you got to figure out, why am I here? Again, that purpose question. And when I looked back over my time and the things I've done in my life, I realized that my mother dying young at 35, to me was a real big thing about life is short, so go hard. So maybe that's kind of why I describe why I did what I did during my life.
What can you do, what can you say to really describe the sort of man that your old man is as well? Because reading a bit more research into your story, because was he 40 when
40
when your mother passed, and having to raise 4 kids under the age of 11, raising you guys on the DPB to support your mum during those critical moments. How would you describe your old man to people that don't know him? What sort of person is he?
Oh, he's determined. He's very caring. He's also imperfect, right? He's not an angel, my dad. He had his faults like everybody, but he was very determined that the dream that mum and him had coming over here, which is a good education for the children so they can have a better life. He was really determined to make sure that nothing would stand in our way for that. And so when money was an issue, and he sent us to really good schools, they were Catholic schools. They weren't cheap compared to public schools, which were free at the time. He was paying off our school fees for 10 years after we'd left school. And where he couldn't give with money, he gave with time. So he was that dad at the school fairs, running around, helping to drop kids off, So he would use his time to pay back to the schools that were caring for his kids. So I think that was, I learned a lot from that. And I think that's slightly why I became that mum when I started having my own children.
Yeah, it's almost not until you're a parent, hey? I had that sort of transformation when I became a dad because my mum was 18 when she had me. And when it's sort of same thing. When I turned 18, I was like, wow, this was the age when my mum had to look after another human. And it was the same as me because I had my little girl when I was just 16. So yeah, I feel like when you become a parent, hey, it's like you really do reflect on like the sacrifices that your parents make for you.
Yeah, and I think especially when you become a young parent, I was 23 when I first had my first child. Man, it snaps you out of it, and it's a bit like, oh, I better get my together.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
like it really does make you focused.
You can swear on this podcast if you want, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but I'm still a politician, so won't say some other words.
Yeah. The youth and the opposition are always listening and watching.
Yeah.
I guess, with your, again, like sort of growing up, are there any memories that sort of stand out to you from like some of the more like challenging periods? Like any distinct memories that pop up when I ask that question?
There are challenges. I mean, like I think about different things. It's more like the feeling as opposed to experiences, you know. So the experience of being hungry, I remember that feeling. But, you know, sometimes there was just the one meal. It was the dinner and you kind of had to scrounge around for Weet-Bix. Back then, Weet-Bix was cheap. You know, Weet-Bix with jam on it or peanut butter or, you know. So I do remember the feeling of hunger, but didn't really know that it was a thing. Kind of just, you know, we were always busy and Dad did his best to make sure there was food in the cupboard, even though it was quite scarce. Yeah, there was kind of more. I think I look back and whether I'm just blocking that trauma, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I mean, I do look back and I just think it's probably to my personality as well, that I look more for the good stuff, you know, the good stuff of, I remember when I had prize giving one year and my sisters who were a little bit older and were working, they bought me a box of chocolates because they said that that's what Dad did when they won prizes at school. So it was the kind of their way of now continuing Dad's, you know, legacy. We were never big on birthdays because we didn't have the money. And so when, again, my sisters and older siblings were working, you know, started to get birthday presents kind of as a teenager. So, you know, those things that having older siblings and having a family that, you know, when the time comes, they sort of give back or fill those holes. I look back on it really fondly.
Yeah, it's amazing what parents can do. They can sort of, I don't know, almost hide some of the challenges that they go through and make sure, just spilled some coffee, and just, make it that you can be quite oblivious as a young person to what's really is going on.
Yeah, and again, it's not till you're an adult and you look back and you think, you're a dad with 4 kids, you're on the benefit. How are you going to make things work? You know, and it's not till you have your own kids you realize, geez, that's pretty legendary. Yeah.
So I think what's also is really unique, you know, and I'm sure lots of people talk about this, but you're a mother to 8 kids, which is incredible. It almost seems unimaginable to do that alongside a political career. So yeah, like what is the honest reality of like managing both sides of like family and life?
Hard, and you should probably best question. You should have my husband on this podcast. He'll tell you the honest truth. But actually, 17 years ago, when we moved down to Porirua from Auckland, my husband decided to live out his dream. His dream was to walk our kids to school. My dream was to become a doctor or a lawyer, so I became a lawyer. And so we just make it work. There is no right way or wrong way when it comes to families, you know, and families aren't just a mum and dad. They're all different shapes and sizes. So we just make it work in the respect that for the last 17 years, he's been the stay-at-home dad. He's been the one taking them to everything. He's been the one that walks them to school. You know, for me, that's such a gift now, being able to walk my kids to school. But ultimately, we just figure it out. There's some bits that are hard and there's some bits that work really well. You know, Saturdays are pretty crazy for our family.
Yeah, how do you do sports?
Oh, yeah. So this year we only got four games on a Saturday. Our record is 10. So it's really good now because 3 of our older kids all have licenses. They all drive. So we can they can help out where they need to. But ultimately it's me and the husband working out the schedule and, okay, I'll take this one here for warm up. You pick up this one and I'll go here. You know, it's kind of that sort of, you just do it. you figure it out. Yeah.
That's I've only got the one, and that's hard enough with Saturday footy in the morning.
Oh yeah. And just finding a car park, man.
Yeah,
That's the hardest bit.
That is really tough. Do you get, I guess, a little bit fatigued from everyone sort of bringing up that, element? I feel like it's almost similar when Jacinda Ardern was in the role, where they're like, oh, she's going to become a mum, and it's like, if this shoe was on the other foot and it was like a male prime minister, like, would that same narrative be happening? Like, I don't know if you've ever thought the same thing. Like, if I was actually not a female, would this still be such a big, like, topic?
I do sometimes wonder, I think about Sir Bill English, Jim Bolger, they've got big families, and it wasn't, people knew they had a big family, but it wasn't really talked about. In some ways, though, it is what it is, and I'm okay with that, because actually my family is a big reason why I got into what I got into. There are some boundaries for me. So quite recently I was asked to do a magazine spread with me and the children and the husband. I said no to the kids. For me, it's that I chose my job, you didn't, and actually there's a certain amount that I can protect you from, and having your face in a magazine and be more recognisable. Even my social media as an MP, people know I've got 8 kids, but I only share photos of them where it's quite obscure. You can't really identify them. So those are sort of the boundaries that I've decided to put in. So, it's just one of those decisions. I got into this, not you. So where I can control it, I will.
Is that one of the hardest parts of the job, like the public scrutiny? Because I think for a lot of people thinking about, oh, maybe I want to be a politician one day, like the public scrutiny, I think will get to 99.9% of people maybe considering that as like a career choice. How do you sort of handle that element? It must be incredibly like fatiguing.
Yeah, well, it's massive. Like you do belong to the public because you're taking public office, right? I mean, the public pay for your, pay your bills ultimately. And I've been actually in the Parliament precinct since 2015, first working as a private secretary to 2 National Party ministers, so public sector person. Went into a political role under Jacinda's government, and then an MP eventually. I've seen it change as well, the way that public deal with politicians in sort of that last 10 years. And I've also seen in the last few years, particularly with social media, the speed in which people expect you to do things, to change things, to respond to things, to oppose things, and that comes through the media cycle is really quick, and everybody's got a platform now on their social media. So the scrutiny is pretty massive, which is why, again, I'm really careful about where and when I bring my family into the public domain. So that even goes down to the physical, in the sense that if I'm going to an event, I'm quite particular which event I take my children to, if I need to. Most of the time I don't need to. But like if it's a school fair in the local area, I know my youngest daughter, who's 12, would love to come to the school fair, so she'll come with me. And most people generally are really respectful when you are with your kids, and if anything, you're just part of the community anyway. But yeah, the scrutiny is pretty massive, and I think for anybody wanting to come into politics, I think you have to have a really clear understanding, again, what your purpose is, why you're here, because that's going to support you when the scrutiny on you is pretty massive. And particularly when you're in like a senior role like I am in our party, being the finance spokesperson, there is lots of scrutiny on you, on every word you say.
It must be so intense. Are you even thinking of this podcast? Like, how do I frame? I kind of thought with having you on the podcast, Barbara, you might rock in with a whole bunch of like PR experts, and they'll be behind the scenes being don't say that. But it's just you, so
yeah. I mean, you just learn. Like you learn when you need to check yourself. But again, you can't wear a mask in this job. It is really hard to wear masks in public office, actually in any job, because the scrutiny on you is so intense that if you let your mask slip, people will see what the real you is. So when they say, when people show you the real, who they really are, believe them. So it's easy for me to come on this podcast in the same way it is for me to do a magazine spread. It's the same way to do radio in the morning, because it has to be genuinely you. Because if it's not, you're just going to fail.
Yeah, 100%. I also think that's very similar with like podcasting as well. Like you can't, especially for long form interview content, people listening to this will get a good understanding to how you answer questions, like what sort of person you are. And also for me too, like I can't sort of hide and pretend to be someone that I'm not, because you hear every little bit of how someone speaks and thinks, and you just can't sort of shy away from that in like a, hour-long conversation.
No, you'll get caught out.
Yeah, definitely. So you're a specialist tax lawyer. You worked inside Parliament for a number of years, sort of advising national ministers. Was it Michael Woodhouse and Judith Collins?
Yep.
Then after that, I guess you took a bit more of a leap to work inside the Labour Party, not as like a sort of bipartisan, public
political.
servant. Yeah. So what was it, I guess, from working and I guess advising to National Party ministers that made you really think, actually, I want to get more involved in the Labour Party? Did they ever tip you for maybe running for national? I'm keen to just understand, did you see something which made you go, okay, I want to go to that side of Parliament?
So back to your earlier point around values, my values have always been aligned with Labour. So that again comes through my life story. It's been Labour policies that's helped me as a child not fall through the cracks. So when my parents got their first home, they capitalised their family scheme benefit. That's a policy of Sir Walter Nash. When Mum died and Dad had to go on the benefit, the welfare state was established by Sir Michael Joseph Savage. When me and my husband were having kids and we needed extra money, we were applicable for working for families. That's Helen Clark, Sir Michael Cullen. When I finished uni, if you can get the picture, interest-free student loans. Again, another Labour policy, KiwiSaver, winter energy payment. So these are all the policies that aligned with which helped me and the values for me. So not so much winter energy payment best up, that comes a little bit later, actually during the Jacinda government. So the values are there for me, but as a public servant, we have amazing public servants in our country. They are people that put aside their personal views to provide the government of the day free and frank advice. Knowing that they might be giving advice to a minister that might actually really piss their minister off because it's not the advice they want to hear. But that's their job. And we are one of 3 countries in the world that has a neutral public service. That should be something we never change in New Zealand. That keeps us special. Because it means we know that doesn't matter who the master is, who the prime minister is. We have this neutral group of people who are trying their best to do what's best for the country by providing the most free and frank advice. So being able to work for National was easy because I know my job as a public servant, give free and frank advice, advise ministers on tax. So that is my background with tax. So advise them on, this is how student loan system works, working for families, income tax, corporate tax, thin capitalisation rules, whatever it is, that's my job, is to advise them. No problems. I don't need to think personally whether I would agree with them or not. My job is give them the advice. Their job is make a decision. And then when Jacinda's government came in, it really was like someone put a vacuum on top of the beehive, sucked out all the national people in, and plopped in what I saw was New Zealand. I actually saw it in the staff and the people, the diversity. So I saw Pacific people, I saw people of all different shapes and sizes, I saw people who are Māori and ethnic. And I thought, this feels comfortable to me because I'm in my tax world, there's not that many Pacific people, if I'm really frank. And so I'm working now in an environment where it's okay, where diversity is normal. And then obviously my personal views align with Labour. And so when my boss at the time, Stuart Nash, was the minister I was appointed to, because every time a minister changes, you go to them as the public servant. After a week, he didn't have a political advisor, and I put my hand up, and he said yes straight away. That's a red flag.
Why?
That should have been a red flag because ultimately it meant that he makes decisions really quickly. So I said, no, you should think about it over the weekend and come back to me. And then he said, I want you as my political advisor. He goes, you don't know this, but 2 people before I became a minister basically rang him and said, you need to keep Barbara in your office. So, you never know who your champions are, if you do a good job. But ultimately, I took on the political role and covered a whole different lot of portfolios. And for me, it just felt like home. And then, eventually led me to being an MP.
Wow. So being a political advisor, was that like almost for you like a job, but almost like an internship into being an actual politician? Like if that sort of tenure went shits up, do you think you still would have wanted to run for like Mana, or was that like a bit of a test for you?
It helps. If anything, actually put me off wanting to be the MP because I've seen behind the curtains. I know how hard it is having worked in there, and ultimately, the public servant's job is to serve their minister. The political advisor and the political staff's job is to protect the minister. There's quite a different distinction. And so when sort of 2020 came around and Chris Farfoy, who was our electorate MP here in Mana, decided to step down, man, my phone went off on that afternoon. You know, people were like, you got to stand, you got to, you know, you're one of us, you're Labour, you work for us, you've got this, you know. But actually, the thing that really helps you be a good MP is actually what you do in your community, because the political advisory role can help you with the process of Parliament, can kind of help you be careful in how you think. But actually being connected to community is so much more about what this job is about, because you're their voice in Parliament. And if you don't know what your community is thinking, then you're pretty rats MP, right? You know, and if you're not out in your community, you have no idea. So again, I was that mum, that barbecue, sausage sizzle mum, the fundraising mum. You know, I was on the board of North's Rugby Club. I was on the committee for Raptors Tag Club. We started that committee. You know, I was on the committee for the Nippers and Te Tahi Bay Surf Club. I was on the board of my kids' schools. I'm that mum plus a political advisor plus a mum of 8. That was my job. Well, that was kind of my role then. And so when it came to being an MP, or being asked to be an MP, I knew that it was hard, and I knew that it was something that I didn't necessarily want to subject my family to. But then things change.
So it sounded like you almost had like the perfect storm sort of brewing, and other people could sort of see that within the party and sort of tipped you for that position.
Yeah, but you have to make the decision for yourself.
Yeah.
And again, because you've seen behind the curtain, you know how hard it is. You know the sacrifices, particularly that families and your spouses have to make in order for you to work as an MP. And it's a challenge. Like, it's still a challenge now, but you just try your best.
What's that first? Because did you first get into Parliament? Was it in 2020?
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, 2020. What's that first year like? Like from when you win the electorate, and then you're suddenly, you know, in government. Is there like a transition period? Do you get training? Like, what does that actually look like?
Oh, you kind of have MP school, like, that's run by Parliamentary Services, right? They just teach you about how you do a bill. You know, you can lodge a bill, how you use the Parliamentary Library, etc. But the most beneficial thing for me is because I'd been working there for 5 years, I kind of knew how the rhythm of the place. Man, I feel for other people that have never worked there before. Yeah, so I had an advantage in that respect. I knew where to go, what to look for, what to do. But other MPs who have come straight off, you know, being a teacher or a union rep or a farmer, they have a totally different training, and it is pretty out there. The thing that I loved, though, is that I'd done a lot of community work as part of my just life. I felt like I was getting paid for it now. So the work that I was doing in the community just expanded a bit further, you know, different villages you take in as part of it. And so I loved it, you know. It was tiring, but I loved it because I felt like I was home and representing home in Parliament.
Is it a hard slog as well as like a backbencher to then earn credibility and like more trust into the party to work your way up? I guess you probably, again, had a bit of a head start in comparison to others. But yeah, it must be tough as like a first year politician.
Yeah, I mean, I think my list placing was something 52 or 53 when I came in, but I wasn't really worried about that. Like for me, it wasn't about ambition and climbing up my party ladder at all. And it wasn't about, I want to be PM or I want to be this minister. You know, really was, I wanted to be a good backbench MP to represent my community. I think that actually works in some ways because you just put your head down and you do the job that you need to do, and you know you're home, you're meeting people across your area. I think that's actually what got me promoted, is because I was just doing what I was there for, and I was really clear in the intention what I was there for. I wasn't in there for me, for the ambition, for the glory, for the authority. I was there because I realised I was at this time the best voice for our area in Parliament.
What do you think most young people misunderstand about Parliament or how the government works?
You'll only see a slice of it, and what you see on social media and what you see on TV, that is a very thin slice of actually what Parliament and what politics is about. And also, it's really stink because I think for young people, they look at some young people will look at politicians and be like, man, you fellas just fight all the time. Do you not understand our planet is burning? We have poor people on the streets, and we should be doing this. And I totally get it. I get that that's incredibly disheartening for some people to see that. But actually, a lot of the work that happens is behind the scenes. A lot of the work that happens to build policy, to talk to people, to then come into a plan that you take to the next election, that's all off camera. And that's all, you don't share that part of social media unless you have to.
True.
But ultimately, it is very different from what you see. Some of it is the same. Like, I'm just thinking about a minister at the AMA Awards in the last week, and some of his comments.
Yes.
Some of his comments. Like I said, if someone showed you their true self, then believe them. But ultimately, there's so much work that happens behind the scenes. And for young people, anybody actually that aspires to be into politics, be really clear why you want to get into politics. Like if it's about change and if it's about being a voice and if it's about being really clear on you wanting to do something, that's really good. It gives you a strong basis to put your hand up. But actually, if it's about ambition and just wanting to be a politician and be in the media and the news, I don't think your career in politics is going to go as far.
I met someone once. I used to work at local government New Zealand back in the day, and I met a young councillor there. And I think we were at our GNZ conference, and I was like, oh, so man, like, what got you into like wanting to run for council? Like, that's awesome. And it was just a part of his grand plan to be a career politician. Like that, at least he was honest enough to say that to me.
That's good.
Yeah, he was I really want to be a career politician. Like, I want to do this as my job. But it just sort of rubbed me off the wrong way. Like, that's not. I feel like if you're sort of treating it as a 9 to 5 or just like an avenue for you to maybe get like a really good paycheck, I don't know if your heart's in the right place.
And there's easier jobs to get better paychecks and better balances. Yeah. It's not politics. But also, there are hard days in politics, and there are hard days to get up where you leave your family, or you just, you need to get up. You need to understand why you're there, because that drives you. That will drive you every day on those hard days. So if you don't have that, other than, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's a thing, it could be proved wrong, but I truly believe those politicians who genuinely don't need to wear a mask, can be their genuine self, can make change, or can help other people, are those who are there for that reason as opposed to ambition.
Yep, agree. What's it like sort of behind the scenes, Barbara? Because I think, like what you said earlier, looking from the outside, looking in, it just looks like a circus half the time. Like, so much heckling going on. It's like, sometimes I look at, like clips on social media or like Parliament TV, and it's like, how are these some of the people that are making, decisions for our future? Like, they're just yelling at each other, and that's like the sort of more nasty side of politics. But yeah, what's it like in like under the hood cap of Parliament? Do you have some like good relationships with other people from like the opposition? What's the general like vibe, I guess, when you're not in the debating chamber? If you see someone walking past, is it like, I will not talk to you, you're from the blue team? No. What's the element of the job like?
Genuinely, it's cordial, like some people say, like Parliament's like Hogwarts. You got different houses and stuff like that.
What houses is Labour, do you reckon?
I won't say. But it effectively is like, you see people, you say hello, and you get to know, especially when you're in select committees, because they're quite small, and a lot of the time they're not live sessions, you know. So you walk in, you're talking, you're like, oh, it's my daughter's 21st this week, or we did this on the farm, or we've been doing this, you know, how was your recess? So it's really cordial. The element that most people see, which is the house, which is the actual debating chamber, oh man, that can actually be really boring. Like if you flick on at maybe 9 o'clock at night, it's like the most boring ass speeches unless something's happened. But the clips that you get, you know, usually that are shared on the news is because they're news. You know, they're confrontational, and they're elements of where we're sort of popping off. But for most of the time, it is general hard slog, put your head down, lots of reading, and you sometimes have negotiations. So if I've got a members bill that I want, you know, maybe New Zealand First to support, then you'll actually have meetings with them and you'll talk through them and say, this is the bill, this is what I want it to do, can you support it, you know, to get numbers. So a lot of it is quite procedural and it's quite boring, but actually, you know, out of respect, we all understand the sacrifices we are making as human beings. We just have different colour houses or different teams. And so there's an element of that respect unless you lose it. So there are not many politicians yet who have lost respect for yet. But there've been very close times.
Hogwarts, I like that. I think it's a good
yeah, it totally is.
Yeah. Very, very fair. Is there a pool in Parliament as well? Just randomly? I think I saw
there is a pool. Yeah.
Joe Damon, who's a comedian.
Oh, yeah, the comedian.
He did like a manu.
Joe. Yeah.
He went in there with Timothy Pool and did probably Parliament's first manu in that pool.
Yeah, because we're locked down. Like, honestly, like people don't realise we can't leave this precinct, like the parliamentary boundaries, unless you have leave from your whips.
Oh,
because
really?
if you leave it, it means that your party has to vote down. So you can only have a quarter of your caucus off. And if for any reason cheeky party says, oh, we want a personal vote, every MP, no matter where you are in Parliament, has to come to the chamber and do a personal vote. Sometimes that happens. So so there are a lot of facilities on site that they've been there for, like, I don't know, longer than I've been there. So there is a pool, there is a gym, there is the cafeteria where we pay for our meals, by the way.
Thanks, clarifying.
There's cafeteria there that, you know, runs till about 8 o'clock at night. But it's because we can't go anywhere.
True.
We have to stay on site, you know. So, I mean, I used to do swimming in the pool ages ago. Don't have time for that. I like my sleep. But
any manus?
Any manus? Not me. My kids saw it though for the first time. Again, I've been there for 10 years, and budget urgency week, the kids came in and had dinner with me because I hadn't seen them all week because we were sitting till midnight. So urgency, you sit till midnight. They came in, they're like, can you take us to show us the pool? So I actually felt like a bad mum. I should have told them to bring a towel and some shorts. So I took them to the pool and they're like, oh, yeah, this is deep enough to do a manu. And I was like, my son's 6 foot. I'm not sure you should be doing a manu in there.
Maybe he bet Joe Damon with the first manu. Who knows?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, big debate about that.
Maybe I'll take a photo for Joe.
Yeah, he'd like that. It almost sounds like one massive like school camp with some kids that you almost don't like. Okay.
Like I said, Hogwarts, man.
It is Hogwarts, yeah.
You know, Team Gryffindor, but anyway.
Yeah. That's so good. Moving a bit more to, like, I guess, NZ's future. What do you think young New Zealanders most misunderstand about the economy today?
See, I have this thing around young people in New Zealand having, maybe it's because my kids are young as well, super engaged. Like when I grew up, I didn't have an encyclopedia in my hand. Yeah. You know, do you know what an encyclopedia is, by the way?
Yes.
Just checking. Yeah, we used to have the sets.
My phone out.
Yeah, we had like Britannia sets, you know, back in the day. That's an encyclopedia. But I have actually, when I think about young people and their understanding of the economy, I think they're more switched on than us adults understand. And I have that view because when I talk to my kids, who are not necessarily hard out political, but they saw something on TikTok. You know, they saw this, guy from the UK who's an economist, happens to be Gary, talking about what a wealth tax is or talking about what bonds are. So they're like, what is that? and so they're curious, and then they've got their phone and they just be like, Google, what's a bond yield, what's a wealth tax, that sort of thing. So I think actually our younger people are much more engaged, much more informed than most people give them credit for, particularly of a generation probably a little bit older than me give them credit for. You now have a calculator in your hand as well. That wasn't like that back in the day. I think if there's anything around the economy, I think more the message that I want to say to young people is it comes down to choices. So the economy is not a person. It is really just the theory in which resources that we have in our world are divvied up or, spread around. And ultimately for governments and people in parliament, it comes down to what is the choices you would make with the resources that the government has. So, but I think they get that.
Is there anything that sort of like keeps you up at night? Because you're in like a decision-making seat, most likely you're going to be one of the next, finance ministers. Really big job. Like, is there anything looking ahead, what scares you the most around like the future direction of New Zealand?
The books, they don't keep me up at night, to be fair. I'm actually sleeping much better. This is a perimenopause thing. This is a podcast, I'm not allowed to say it. But anyway, it's something that for other women that come on here, perimenopause for all you young males, you need to learn about it for when you have a partner, by the way. So I'm sleeping much better because of the medication. But ultimately, for me, the thing that does concern me is the state of our government books, right? So the books like what's coming in, what's going out, where is it being spent, how much debt we have on, also how many assets we have. And it concerns me in the sense that I'm in the process of putting together our fiscal plan, so the numbers thing for Labour. There are going to be some really hard choices we have to make as well. And so that bit concerns me because I'm always thinking about who loses if we choose this. Who wins if we lose this? Are we okay with those people being the losers, and are we okay with those people being the winners? So that general thought does concern me. And every now and then it pops up during the day when I'm doing something, but then ultimately I go through this process of, okay, if it's something that's really concerning, I write it down, pop it down my notes in my phone, and it's something that I go back and revisit when I start to actually sit down. The hardest thing actually being a politician is being able to sit behind a desk because you just don't have that time. So when I get those hours of moments and I have to block them out to sit behind my desk to write stuff, those are gold. Yeah.
Without that sort of context switching all the time,
dedicated, focused time to actually pulling together a policy that you're going to take to the next election.
Must be super, like, it's such a long game as well, politics, and there must be so many conversations around like how much political capital do you deploy to certain challenges or sort of opportunities, and it must be tough because I'm sure there's things where you're like, okay, cool, we could do X, we could throw X million at whatever the solution is, and like fix it now, but like it doesn't really work that way.
No, and that's why reckons ain't great. You need evidence and data to support you. And then you need to be able to critically analyze that evidence and data, because you have to think, is there a bias in the way that this data has been presented? Is there a way in which actually they've missed something when they should have asked this as part of that evidence gathering? So there's that element of it, but ultimately you have to make a hard choice, and you have to hold it, you have to wear it, and then you have to sell it to everybody else. So it's part of the job.
What's been the hardest decision you've had to make?
Don't feel like they've been like super hard, if I'm really frank, because I'm again very practical. I'm quite practical in how I go along things, and so that by the time I get to a decision, I feel supported by having gone through that quite logical process. I would say though that I do recall, and it wasn't actually when I was the decision maker, it was probably when we were doing the March 15th, the firearm reform. So I worked on that for Jacinda and for Stuart Nash, who was my boss, the police minister at the time. I think some of the decisions that we had to do around the second firearm reforms, they were really difficult ones because you wanted to ensure that there are law-abiding firearm holders. You want to make sure that the system works enough so they want to comply, and the majority of them do. They're really good with it. But at the same time, having to say to them, we can't have a March the 15th again. So where have been the gaps that other politicians have not wanted to fill, because there were inquiries in that beforehand, or select committee inquiries, and nothing changed. But I recall in particular, there was a certain type of accessory that in one hand seems fine for normal purposes and used for really valid purposes, but then actually on the other hand was something that was used in a really bad way that 51 people died. So it's not that it was a hard decision, but it was a challenging decision to be able to ensure that the decision we made was communicated clearly, that it was for safety reasons. And that seems like, at the time, at the height of what was happening on March 15th, that was fine. But we were now about, a year later trying to put these reforms through where you don't have that sort of safety alarm bells at the top of people's head to say, yes, this seems like a benign thing, but actually we needed to change it.
Yeah, what a crazy moment in history that was. I remember that, March the 15th, it fell on my daughter's birthday. It was just a crazy time. I think 2 days before that as well, or maybe the day of, there was like that awesome, huge, massive like climate change protest. Same day, that's right. Just like a whirlwind of crazy events.
Yeah, it was that morning was the climate strike.
That's right.
And, I have photos being in Parliament, taking photos of that. And then March 15th, we got the phone call about 10 to 3 because we were the first office to be called. Basically, the phone call from our private sec had been at police headquarters, and they said there's been an attack or firearms attack. We don't know if it's 2 people or if it's 1 people. Like, there was just no information. And he said, I'm coming back to the office, walking down Molesworth. And I said, no, you go back to police headquarters and you stay there and you feed us information. And that was the start of what became a really massive part of my professional career.
So you were a political advisor to Stuart Nash, police minister at the time.
At the time. And
wow.
And so it was my job ultimately. Like, it seems like I remember so much stuff from that day. Beautiful sunny day in the afternoon. And I remember I got up to go to the bathroom after that phone call, and then our press sec, because I shared an office with the press sec, and the press sec sent me a link, and I came back from the bathroom and she said, don't look at it. And I was like, oh, what is it? Of course I'm going to look at it. You say someone don't look at something, you look at it. And that was the live stream. And so it was just like, just then it was like, okay, this is massive. Yeah. We now have to react. Yeah. So it was pretty full on. And that evening we took Jacinda a report, went up to the 9th floor, took Jacinda a report of the firearm changes that we were hoping to have implemented. She took that home that night. I left the building just after midnight. I took a photo of the flag just after midnight that night. And then the next morning, she rang our boss and just said, we're going to ban those firearms. And that was 8:30 was her press conference. And then, man, I didn't see my family much that month after that. That was our job. That was my job, was to coordinate between the Beehive, police, and get this legislation through.
Wow. Yeah, I can admit that is crazy.
Yeah, it was probably, and like everyone asked me, what's the biggest piece of work that you've worked on? I was like, even though I wasn't an MP at the time, to be there to do that, and then probably in COVID, working from my home in Titahi Bay, helping to draft policy around wage subsidies and small business cash flow loan schemes. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty full on time.
All from hearty little Porirua, eh?
Yeah, little Titahi Bay.
It's amazing. What sort of person was Jacinda Ardern, like as Prime Minister, sort of behind the scenes? Like, is there anything that most New Zealanders would be sort of surprised to learn about her, or the way that she worked, or the way that she is as a person?
What you see is what she was. She's really funny too, like really witty and really funny. What you see about her being caring is exactly what she was. On the on the last day of the third reading of that banning those firearms, that bill, you know, she came down with a cake that she had organised for our office to say thank you. You know, those little things. She's the Prime Minister of our country. She did not have to come down to our floor to give us a cake to say thank you. You know, it's those little things that Jacinda, that she looked what she looked, you know, she looked caring, she looked kind, she actually was, and she was funny. You know, she's really funny. So I'm so happy for her. You know, she's got a book that's coming out. She's got a movie. Can't wait to see her documentary. I'm so happy for her that the world recognises what an amazing leader she is. And I think history will look back on her in New Zealand and will also agree with that. But it's still tough.
Yeah. There's lots of sort of like hate for Jacinda. It's definitely something that you see a lot within like sort of social media comments and a lot of just negative rhetoric. I think there's so much like coming from COVID. There's still so many people. I think it's probably the connection to like mandates and the economy and everything. But I also, when I look at all of those comments, I'm like, how many of these are actual people? How many are actually just bots? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I find that too. I find the rhythm when I put up a post and all of a sudden it gets high engagement and then you get a lot of negative stuff. Like you look at the people and it's just like, oh, 3 friends.
Yeah.
You know, block you. I mean, it's quite a manual process, but it's like, well, it's my page. I can control it.
100%. What about your relationship with former Prime Minister, current leader of the Labour Party, Chippy, Chris Hipkins? Yeah, what sort of guy is he like?
Chippy's awesome. Yeah, Chippy is really another funny guy. Really political. You know, he's just got such a good sniff test. You know, I sometimes have to do stand-ups with Chippy, where people will see this on the news where there's like the main minister and then there's people behind them flanking them, as they would say. And so I've had to do a number of stand-ups with Chippy, and just, you know, when the reporter asks the question, you kind of practice in your head what you would say. Yeah. And Chippy's just like a level above that. You know, he's neck level compared to like the answer I've got in my head. And he's a great person, you know, and I owe a lot to Chippy. Like when he became Prime Minister at the beginning of 2023, he made me a minister and I became a minister for that 10 months. When Grant Robertson resigned, you know, he had enough confidence in me that he knew that I could do the job as the finance spokesperson. That's a massive role. Like that's a massive role in any political party, particularly in opposition, because you're trying to get on the benches. So yeah, good guy, and you know, just a real dad. Yeah.
He was actually on the Dom Harvey podcast fairly recently, and it was cool. He just sort of opened up to like more of his sort of personal side of who he is, and yeah, I thought it came across really well. He was like funny as, and just didn't take himself too seriously.
No, totally not. Yeah, like that's totally not Chippy.
Yeah.
You know, and he'd come through the similar route as I had. He had come as a political advisor to Helen Clark. So he'd had that kind of grounding. He'd come through student politics. He loves politics because for him it's about people and, again, choices. So for Chippy, yeah, he's a good bloke.
How does that conversation go when you get appointed the spokesperson for finance for Labour? Is that a call from Chippy? Did Grant Robertson have that conversation? And did you have any feelings of like imposter syndrome when you got that appointment?
Oh shit, yeah. So actually Chippy rang me before the summer break, and he said Grant has indicated to him that he will resign during this term. And he said he doesn't know when it's going to happen, but he said he wanted me to consider being the next finance spokesperson. And so he said, you don't have to give me an answer, but it's a really big role and I want you to have time to think about it. So that was like November. And then, yeah, Grant resigned in February. And so when that kind of like a couple of days beforehand, it was like, oh, it's actual, you know, it's actually going to happen. You just kind of can't say no.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm more than qualified to do this. You know, I've got a tax background. I also have a Bachelor of Arts, just for those, but a law degree and 10 years of tax to go with it. But there's not that many finance spokespersons in our country's history that have actually had a finance background. Roger Douglas was one. When Andrew Bailey and Michael Woodhouse split the role under Judith, they both, Michael's an accountant and Andrew is an investment banker history. So, and then myself and John Key, you know, because he did investment banking, and then myself.
Yeah.
So there's only a handful of us that have actually worked in the finance area. And tax is the perfect area because it's a mix of accounting, economics, and law. So in some ways, I knew I was more than capable. Like, this year will be the 17th budget that I've been involved in, whether as an official, as a MP, or as a political staffer. So I know where to look for things. I know how they're put together. I know the process in which Treasury works with, you know, ministers, etc. And I know the scrutiny. So I didn't really have the imposter syndrome on that side. Where I did have the imposter syndrome, though, is that if I was political enough. You know, I've come from a background where you bring a community together to get things done because there's not much in our community. Being a politician in 2020 meant that actually you had to be quite vocal about what your values were. So I found that okay, and I found fighting for my area really good, really easy. But for me, it's just, you know, Grant's, he was hilarious. He was so witty in the House, and he was so smart. He picked up the finance role. So I look at Grant, I'm like, yeah, I'm not a Grant, you know. I'm more the serious, you know, I'm going to say this geeky person behind the scenes that just works in the kitchen or works on paper. Yeah. You know, so that's where I had the imposter syndrome, is would I be political enough to be able to take this on? And it's still a work in progress. But actually, when it comes back to it, politics is about people. It's about fighting for those people. So that's where my political skill set starts to sort of hone in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it wasn't necessarily around like your own capability around the technical side of things, but more so around like matching the political nous of, Robertson, who went before you. Yeah, he was sharp, eh? He had some good like little jabs
one-liners and jabs. And,
yeah,
that's not me.
Yeah.
But also the communication part of it, you know, like, again, I'm a policy wonk and I will take time to explain things, but that's not actually what media need. They need that quick soundbite, that one line.
Are you interested in ever leading the Labour Party?
Yeah, nah.
Yeah, nah?
Yeah, nah. Like, honestly, again, it was hard enough to become an MP because I saw how hard it was behind the scenes. You know, I've been privileged enough to have seen behind the closed doors of what it's like for Jacinda to be a Prime Minister. Yeah. And you see how hard it is. I now see how hard it is for Chippy, you know, being the leader of the opposition, and how much sacrifice and how much energy he puts into the job. I am so happy where I am because I can do my job. I still get, you know, I'm still learning the communication stuff, but leading it is a whole next level, you know, and it's just, again, it's just not the thing that I'm focused on. My thing is around trying to actually make sure we have a credible plan we take so we can win the next election for Chippy as Prime Minister.
Never say never. Never say never. Cool. We've got some quick fire, like, sort of questions that will come to soon. But before that, we have some questions from some of the listeners of Beyond the Surface. So this one's from Daniel. NZ is super expensive and not sustainable. What's your views on mean testing and raising the retirement age?
Yeah, so we're not going to raise the retirement age. And again, comes down to choices. You can afford this if you choose not to do other things. So again, around the means testing, it's not on our policy platform because our view is that we believe that older people have worked all their life, and they basically, for a lot of people, they actually need to depend now on the super. What we actually need to focus on actually is KiwiSaver and savings. That's where we need to put and direct our attention to help people build more for their retirement savings so that when they get to that age, they don't really need to depend on the super to help them live the lifestyle they want to live. I also think, to be fair, if you're going to raise the age, there has to be a cutoff point, right? And so I'm 44 now. How can I say to a 40-year-old, by the way, yeah, I know the generation before us got free tertiary education, were easy for them to get in their first house. But by the way, by the time we're going to retire, we're not going to be able to get universal super. How is that fair? You know, that's the call. Someone has to make that call. And you're saying to the generation who's coming through, our parents had all these great things
Benefits.
that have been taken away from them. And by the way, they're going to take a bit more for when it's your turn. The question is how do you work in an economy? How do you support the economy to make the choices so that we don't need to make those sort of choices?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, eh? It's in, I don't know, like with growing up, I'm kind of like, man, not accepting that in the future the pension might be like, you get it, you're entitled to it when you're 75, but you're right, it would feel like such a slap in the face. Yeah, if you're a young person and it just keeps raising. But
You raise the age or you income test it, and then you also say to them, by the way, we've cut the government contributions to your KiwiSaver, which for a person, if you're 18 now, could be that the cutting off that contribution was $66,000 that you could have had more in your KiwiSaver. So there's going to be a point, but at the time, this for Labor that's not where we're focusing on.
This one's from Henry. What is your message? I think it's a good one too. What is your message to students in Aotearoa who vape, especially those in Porirua?
Who vape? Well, first of all, you make the decision for yourself, right? Your body is your temple, so how do you want to treat your temple? That's a question for you. How do you want to treat it? But the evidence is still really dodgy around vaping, and the evidence also points to the fact, one of the changes that we had here in Porirua, and it came from Porirua, was there was a vape shop that opened across the road from Russell School. And through the work that our local office here did with our intern, we managed to get some changes to the vaping laws, which basically said you can't be within a certain amount of metres of a school. It meant that we couldn't help that shop because the law was already in, but it meant that future shops had to be a certain amount of away from schools and stuff like that. It's your body, it's your choice, but the evidence is out there about actually how good it is to your body. So, my advice to you is make good choices. I'm a mum, make good choices.
Yeah, it's crazy, eh? It's just like we've had this window of opportunity, like, smoke-free New Zealand, and now like vapes are probably more people are vaping than smoking now. And that was not the intention of vaping when it was brought in. It was helped you to get smoke-free. Yeah. But also not changing the legislation where we have a smoke-free generation for 14-year-olds, which is something that they brought in their first, before the end of the year for $1 billion for tax cuts. Again, choices that governments have to make. Yeah, 100%. Got another one here from Aaron. So you worked with, his question is you worked with, two National Party sort of ministers. Like what was it through that experience that, sort of taught you something about your political journey ahead? Yeah,
I learnt from Judith to expect to set high standards for your office, your political office. Your political office makes or breaks a minister, and Judith's office was highly functioning. I actually really enjoyed working for Judith's office. Really clear boundaries, really clear expectations. So with Judith's office is set clear expectations, and if you want excellence, then that's what you have to drive in an office environment. In relation to Michael, I actually learnt the office culture of fun and the importance of actually down tools. So Michael Woodhouse was, just a really nice man. And we would have every Thursday before he catches his flight back to Dunedin, the office would down tools, packets of chips, have a beer or a wine or non-alcoholic drink, and we'd just listen to music, do the quiz. Cool. That was just one small thing every week, which I think that actually we are still humans. We do a tough job, but actually putting your down tools and just being able to enjoy each other and talk and have a laugh, about what's happening. Yeah, I think it's just as important.
That's really nice. We've got some quick fire questions to finish off with. Then we always finish with the quote. Just want to say thanks so much, Barb. It's been heaps of fun. Hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and it's been really cool getting to know you a bit more.
Yeah, awesome. But thanks for having me as well.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's cool to. We might be like one of the only sort of podcasts in Porirua. So
I know, which is why I'm so here, man. I'm here for this.
No, it's mean. Cool. I guess before we wrap up as well, where can people keep in touch with you and your mahi?
Barbara.edmonds@parliament.govt.nz if you actually need support or help. But you can find me on Facebook on Barbara Edmonds MP for mana.
Awesome. These are also Pira Moana Road Sunnies from
Kia ora.
only sponsor of the podcast. Shout
Thank
out
you.
Moana Rose.
Thank you, Moana Road. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. You know Paulie B. Cool. We'll do these quick fire questions. What brings you true happiness?
Family.
What is the meaning of life?
Family.
Advice you wish you knew about when you were younger?
Don't sweat the small stuff.
What does legacy mean to you?
It's being able to close your eyes on your deathbed and have the people that love you around you.
If you could change one thing in New Zealand, what would this be?
Poverty.
And what do you believe is the main thing that is holding back young people in New Zealand?
Older people.
Cool. We'll finish off with a quote here. This is from Ed Latimore. He's a writer and former heavyweight boxer, and it's on outsmarting yourself. Someone with half your IQ is making 10 times more than you because they aren't smart enough to doubt themselves. Cheers.
Amen.